Lessons from Hewlett Packard.
Thank you, Alicia. Fellow Toastmasters and guests. It will be next year, and we will be getting together up in Loveland as a celebration of starting for Hewlett Packard 50 years ago. Our class, really we think of ourselves as the second generation because our Hewlett, Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard, were the same ages as our fathers. The real reason we'll be getting together is because to celebrate a product that we put out 40 years before. I want to tell you a little bit about Hewlett and Packard because it was the most incredible company ever to work for. I hear, you hear these days about corporations, and it's always a negative tone over the whole thing, and the string basses are playing minor notes. And then there's other words added like evil and profit hungry. You hear it all the time. I hear it in Toastmasters. I hear these, and I say, who are these people? Because I can't relate at all. I want to tell you a little bit about what happened at Hewlett Packard. And I have some quotes, and there are a lot of them on the internet about these days by Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard. One by Packard said this: "I think many people assume wrongly that a company exists simply to make money. While this is an important result of a company's existence, we have to go deeper to find our real reason for being. A group of people get together and exist as an institution that we call a company to do something worthwhile. They make a contribution to society." And all the time that I was with HP, I really felt that I was making a contribution to society and the products that we developed and put out. I want to tell you a little bit about some instances and some quotes from Bill Hewlett and Packard and highlight them. There are so many of them that I will be lucky to even get to 7 minutes with a couple of them. The first one is a quote which was done by Hewlett, Bill Hewlett. I must say that when I first started, they would come around, they would visit the division up in Loveland, and they would come up to my desk. And they would talk to me, and he'd ask me what project I was working on, and I would tell them, and they'd ask questions back and forth. And that's the way it was. It was part of Hewlett and Packard's managing by walking around, a famous thing in the human resources area these days, but it was Hewlett and Packard that started that. Packard made the comment, "We wish to operate as much as possible on a pay-as-you-go basis, that our growth be financed by earnings and not by debt." And from this I learned some things about money management. And it all goes back to an incident that happened just after I started with HP in the late 70s. Dave Packard went off to work for the government as Deputy Secretary of Defense. And he was gone for 3 years. When he came back, the company was in deep debt. For the first time, they had long-term debt. And Packard went crazy about this. And so he came around to all the divisions. And I was a new young manager, and I was sitting in this room up in Loveland. And Packard came up there, and he gave us fire and brimstone. He told us the reasons why we didn't want to have debt. He said that it was going to end, and that if there weren't managers around that could take care of that, he would find new ones. Well, the whole debt problem with accounts payable and receivable and all the inventory, all types of inventory that were around, and all of that disappeared. The problem was gone in 6 months. And that was the whole thing about Hewlett and Packard, is that if you're in charge of a company, you have a vision for what that company is going to do. But it is so hard to get the troops to all understand it and walk in the same direction. Well, I'll tell you, that meeting that Hewlett had, the fire and brimstone one, set the direction, and everyone talked about that for the rest of the time that I was at Hewlett Packard. A second thing that happened was, at about the same time, I was working on the second generation of the desktop computer, the only ones in the world at that time. And it came out in 1971, and I was sent out to train engineers after I managed the memory system of it. And I was sent out to train the salesmen. Now we're in Montreal, and I met the sales manager of all of Eastern Canada. His name was Jean-Pierre. And Jean-Pierre was, he was a great guy, and he invited all of us out to his house, and we had steaks with him that he barbecued, and he turned out to be a good friend. But a month later, I heard that he'd been fired. And what had happened is that there had been some interaction with Hewlett Packard and the government there were some ethical questions there. Packard hopped on the plane, flew out there, and fired him on the spot. And a couple of months after that, there was a new manual on ethics in business. So he set the example again. There's one more has to do with Bill Hewlett. And he made a comment, which is, believe and you can change the world. And here's an example, right here. The desktop computer that I've been working on, is this big. And he says, I want to have that so that it goes into my pocket. That was the vision. And it's hard to get everyone to understand that vision, because every day when they were designing this, they would come up and they say, well, how big is your pocket? And they would say, well, we're going to have to use an awful lot of energy or power, and so we're going to have big batteries, and it's going to take longer. And Hewlett would say, well, I just want it to fit right in there. There's all stories about what Steve Jobs did, similar kinds of things, about how he made great products come out. And it was because he was just bullheaded about something like this. Well, this product did change the world. When it came out, it killed all slide rules that all engineers in the world used. The world was never, ever the same. Well, next summer, when I'm with my buddies, we'll be talking about the great times with Hewlett and Packard. And there will be all the quotes about Hewlett Packards and all these stories that we had and all the lessons that we learned. I really look forward to it, because it really was the best company in the world.